Tomorrow is a big day here. We are marking the UN Day, UN Peacekeepers Day, the International Peacekeepers Day. We will have Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the head of the Peacekeeping Peace Operations Department, brief you here. And of course, we will have the usual medal ceremonies, as well as the Secretary General laying the wreath at the Peacekeepers Memorial up on in the North Lawn. In a statement we issued last night, the Secretary General expressed his shock and sadness at the heinous mass shooting that took place at an elementary school in Uvalde in Texas. It is particularly heart-wrenching, he said, that most of the victims are children. The Secretary General extends his heartfelt condolences to the families and loved ones of the victims and to the entire community. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is in Indonesia, where today she formally opened the 7th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction 2022. She did this together with the Indonesian President, Mr. Joko Widodo, the Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction, Mami Mizutori, and the President of the General Assembly, Abdulla Shahid. The meeting, titled From Risk to Resilience, brings together governments, the UN system, and others in how to share best practices and knowledge on reducing disaster risk. As you will recall, the Global Assessment Report by the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, which Ms. Mizutori presented to you not that long ago here, found that there were from 300 and 500 medium to large-scale disasters last year in 2021. This number could reach 560 or 1.5 disasters a day by 2030 without radical rethink how risk is managed and financed. At the opening ceremony of the conference, the Deputy Secretary General said, "We have a unique opportunity to consider the best policy options to move from risk to resilience and to take important steps to ensure the recovery from COVID-19 puts us back on track for a safe and sustainable future." On the sideline of the events, the Deputy Secretary General met with the Vice President of Zambia, Ms. Mutale Nalumango, as well as other senior government officials, as well as UN partners. Yesterday, in Bali, the Deputy Secretary General, joined by the resident coordinator for Indonesia, Valérie Julien, visited the Tanjung Benoa Elementary School to observe a tsunami school drill with more than 200 students and teachers. Quick update on Ukraine, where our humanitarian colleagues tell us that over the past 2 days, fighting is continuing in Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast, and to a lesser extent in Kharkivska Oblast. Other parts of Ukraine have also been impacted by missile attacks, all raising concerns for the protection of civilians. Our humanitarian partners also warn that there are critical shortages of medicines in southern Kherhanska Oblast. 90% of the pharmacies across the oblasts are closed, and prices have increased 3 to 5 times. We, along with our partners, are continuing our life-saving work across the country. We have supported nearly 7 million people out of 16 million who need humanitarian aid in Ukraine. We thank donors who've generously provided $1.37 billion. That's about 61% of the $2.25 billion required through August. Our humanitarian colleagues stress that turning pledges into commitments is needed for continuity of humanitarian operations. As we always say, cash is the best. We also continue to advocate for humanitarian access to hardest hit areas, including those beyond the control of the government of Ukraine. And back here at the Security Council, there was an open debate on the protection of civilians in armed conflict. Ramesh Rajasingham, OCHA's Director of Coordination, said conflict continued to cause widespread civilian death and injury and damaged and eroded critical infrastructure, including hospitals, and also put education at risk. As an example, he said that over 900 schools in Afghanistan were destroyed, damaged, or closed in the first 9 months of last year. Mr. Rajasingham called on all parties to conflict to take practical steps to better protect civilians, from tracking reports of civilian harm to gauge the impact of military operations to avoiding the use of explosive weapons with wide area effects in populated areas. He also called on parties to take steps to facilitate humanitarian activities. Those remarks were shared with you. A quick update from the Central African Republic, where we've organized 2 roundtables on local elections, which are projected to take place this year and next. The roundtables promoted better female representation, among other things, and brought together authorities from the sub-prefecture of Mbumu. Meanwhile, our colleagues from the peacekeeping mission in Mali in West Africa have just concluded a 3-day course on international human rights and international humanitarian law for the benefit of the Malian armed forces. Couple of updates from Asia. On the Philippines, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that more than 85,000 people from Marawi City in the Lanao del Sur province remain displaced 5 years after clashes between government forces and militant groups displaced about 350,000 people, or about 98% of the city's population. We are working with partners and are continuing to help the displaced people who need assistance in the areas of food, livelihood assistance, water, sanitation and hygiene, education, health and nutrition and protection. In April of this year, more than 700 families were relocated to permanent shelters. Last week, UN Habitat provided 1,000 shelters at 5 sites. A team from OCHA is currently in Marawi to discuss outstanding needs. And as of yesterday, in all of the Philippines, more than 119,000 men, women, and children remain displaced due to armed conflict, earthquake, flooding, or typhoons. And from Fiji, our UN team, led by the resident coordinator Sanaka Samarasinha, continues to help respond to the pandemic, including by supporting the national vaccination efforts. To date, 95% of the adult population is fully vaccinated. Through COVAX, Fiji has received more than 500,000 doses from Japan, New Zealand, and the United States, and we thank these governments for their donations. The UN team has helped numerous areas, helped people in numerous areas, including in trade, social development, emergency aid, and advancing the SDGs. And today is... Who said Africa Day? Excellent. It is Africa Day. And in a video message to mark the day, the Secretary General said we celebrate the enormous promise and potential of this diverse and dynamic continent. But as we mark the day, he added, we're also reminded of the multiple challenges preventing Africa from reaching its full potential. The COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, as well as the war in Ukraine that is creating a perfect storm for developing countries, especially on the continent. The Secretary General said we must intensify our efforts to end the pandemic, reform the global financial system, stop climate change, and silence the guns across Africa. Tomorrow morning, the Secretary General is scheduled to speak at the opening segment of the high-level policy dialogue that is part of the Africa dialogue. Ray, and then we'll go to Edie.
Thank you, Stéphane. This morning in the Security Council, Mr. Raja Singham said, and I quote, "The prospect of nuclear conflict, once unthinkable, is now back within the realm of possibility." He said that based on what? You have any details to share with us about this prospect of nuclear conflict? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think I'd refer you to what the Secretary General has said, which is it would be unthinkable. But I have nothing else to add to what Mr. Raja Singham said. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea launched 3 ballistic missiles, one of them possibly an intercontinental ballistic missile, earlier today, last night. Does the Secretary General have any comment on these launches?
Well, I mean, I think what we saw happen, the launch of the 3 missiles, only contributes to an increasing regional and international tensions. I will say it again, but and the Secretary General has said it numerous times, that he calls on the DPRK to fully comply with its international obligations under all relevant Security Council resolutions, diplomatic engagement remains the only pathway to sustainable peace and complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
I have one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
There were talks today in Amman, Jordan, between the Houthis and the government. Is there any readout from the conclusion or what happened during these talks?
No, I did not receive anything from our team on the ground on that. Betul, now we'll go to Edward.
Thank you, Steph. Did the Secretary General talk to the Human Rights Commissioner after her visit to China's Xinjiang region? Did she inform him about her trip? And my second question, you already read out a statement on the Texas school shooting, but I am wondering if the SG thinks that guns should be controlled, regulated universally. Thank you.
Okay. On your first, on your question on the first part of the world, no, he hasn't. The visit is ongoing. He has no, there's no plans for the Secretary General to speak to the High Commissioner while the visit is ongoing. I have no doubt that she will check in. I mean, they will speak at some point afterwards. But let's be clear, this is her visit, right? She will, so it's not, she's there on her terms and within her mandate. This is, however, a visit that the Secretary General has more than fully supported and has engaged with Chinese authorities with over the past few months, if not a bit longer.
Gun
Okay,
control?
so on gun control, I mean, you know, what is clear and what we've always said is that the ready availability of small arms, automatic weapons, and ammunition is a clear enabler of violence, and we see that across the world.
I
Right?
have a follow-up on...
Happy for follow-up, but let me finish. Let me finish before you follow up, if you don't mind. You know, from the UN standpoint, from the global standpoint, you may recall, I think in 2000 or 2001, member states adopted a UN program of action to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. This tool, which is a political agreement, right? I mean, it is not a treaty, but it's a political agreement, is meant for member states together to counter the illicit trade and control the negative consequences of small arms and light weapons. They also, through this mechanism, agree to improve national small arms regulations, to strengthen stockpile management, to ensure that weapons are properly and reliably marked, and to improve cooperation in weapons tracing. But in the end, member states will have to enact the policies that they wish to take their own domestic action.
Does he believe that there should be a gun control bill or act or regulation in the U.S.?
Look, that is up for, this is a debate in the U.S. It is up to the U.S. to take the decisions it wants. From our standpoint, we do strongly believe that, you know, the fact that small arms, accompanying ammunition is available widely in many parts of the world, right, is a driver for violence. And we saw it yesterday here. We saw it, a week ago or 10 days ago in Buffalo. But we see it all over in many places in the world, where in the developing world and other places where, if there's ready availability of weapons, there is violence and civilians pay the price.
And I have one more follow-up on my first question. You said that it is her trip,
Right.
Mrs. Bachelet's trip, but does the SG not want to know what the Chinese authorities convey to the High Commissioner?
He's not. Let me rephrase that. It is her trip. She's going there as High Commissioner for Human Rights. he has publicly in this room and in interviews said that he encouraged the Chinese authorities to allow a visit to go forward. It is going forward. I have no doubt she will report back, and I have no doubt she will speak to the SG at some point. Edward and then Benno.
Hi, Steph. Two questions. First, on Ukraine. Yesterday, the Foreign Ministry of Russia said that they would support a humanitarian corridor in Odessa if the Ukrainian side would demine in the waters. So, what's the response from the Secretary General? Do you think it's a, let's say, a positive move from Russia, and will the UN encourage the Ukraine side to do so?
We are not going to engage publicly in our efforts, in the Secretary General's efforts to bring to the global market grain from Ukraine, food and fertilizer from Russia. I mean, he's said publicly what he's trying to do, but we're not going to start to do this. We're not going to get into the minutiae of the discussions publicly.
Okay, the second question is on Afghanistan. Yesterday, the Security Council released a statement concerning the de facto authority Taliban's policy on women and girls. We knew that in the past few weeks, there were many policy reversals from Taliban, and every single time, actually, I believe I asked you several times on this. And every time you said the UN would engage with the authorities there, I just want to know first, does the Secretary General had any new comments on the situation that the Taliban forbids women to show their face on TV? And second, if every single time the UN has the contact with the authority in Afghanistan, I mean, what happened? What's their reply? It seems like they do this like one by one, getting worse and worse.
That's a statement of fact, what you just said, that things are getting worse and worse. And I think we're increasingly concerned by all of these measures that are not just chipping away, but hacking away at the rights of women and girls. And you're also right that this is something we raise repeatedly with the de facto authorities, with the Taliban, when we meet with them. What their exact response is, I don't know. What I do know is that there's no forward positive movement on it. And I also think a number of senior Taliban leaders have been interviewed recently, and have publicly stated their position and the rationale for their position. Benno and then Gregory.
Thank you. Want to follow up to Betul. During Michelle Bachelet's visit, there was that incident in China that she was portrayed as saying that she admired China's protection of human rights. Can you roll out that she said these words?
I'm not aware that she said these words. What I would, as with any case, when others are portraying what UN officials would say, I would look at what she's said herself. I think she had 2 tweets recently, and I would take that. But otherwise, if you have further questions, just talk to her office.
But may I ask you, would the UN in this case address with the Chinese authorities that this is
I don't know if they've taken it up, if her office has taken up with her interlocutors. Gregory, and then we'll go to Abdul Hamid, who's on the screen.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Some experts said that there are only global stockpiles of wheat only for 3 months. So does the UN share this forecast? Thank you.
Who said there was only...
Some experts.
I mean, there are a lot of experts in a lot of things that say things publicly, right? Sorry. I don't know what the exact number is. We could ask WFP, but I think the fact that the situation is dire and is critical is clear for everyone to see. And I think the Secretary General has said it so publicly, and David Beasley, as always, has also said it very eloquently. Betul, I'm going to ask you to pause for a second. I'm going to go to Abdel Hamid on the screen.
Thank you, Steph. I have a few questions as well. This morning, a young boy of 16-year-old in Nablus, his name is Gheith, that's Gheith, Yamin, his last name, Yameen, was gunned down by Israel. And on Saturday, another child was killed in Jenin. His name is Amjad Al-Fayed. He was 17-year-old. So those two children added to the about 59 Palestinians killed during this year. About 12 or 13 of them children, 2 women, and yet these 2 children had passed unnoticed by any UN official. Why is that?
As we've said to you repeatedly, we report regularly, monthly to the Security Council on the violence that we've seen, and we will continue to do so. But you're also free to get in touch with Mr. Van Islan's office. Your other question, sir?
Yeah. My second question, on Sunday, Israel is planning a flag march day to mark what they call liberation of Jerusalem. And they're preparing 3,000 security officers. The Palestinian factions in Gaza threatened that if this march goes through, as what happened last year, they will fire. Now, which is more wise from the UN Secretary General to issue a statement calling on Israel to call off the march, or to wait until the Palestinian factions fire?
Our message has on Jerusalem has always been very clear, which is for a call to uphold the status quo and a call for restraint. Betul.
Thanks, Steph. On the grain export from Ukraine, Russian authorities are saying that they would allow the grain export if the sanctions imposed on Russia are lifted. Any reaction to that on the conditions?
I would
Thanks.
refer you to my answer to Edward, the exact same issue a few minutes ago. I'm happy to reiterate. I keep reiterating things here all the time. The short answer is that we are not going to engage publicly on the substance of what we're doing. I mean, I think the SG's goals are very clear. Okay, happy to reiterate anything on anything for anyone? Excellent. Happy Wednesday. Hasta mañana.